Today I'm going to teach you the basics on composting, which composting is one of the most important things of gardening in itself. You cannot garden without compost, and it's very important to make your own compost, and it's so simple. So the key thing is you need two different types of organic materials. You need carbon, which is brown, and then nitrogen, which is green, like this. This is chicken manure, by the way, which is also great nitrogen. But one thing that I want to say is the brown and the green have nothing to do with the color. It's only carbon and nitrogen, which is very important because does this look green to you? No, it looks brown, but that is definitely not carbon, which is very important, by the way. So remember, carbon is brown and nitrogen is green, so keep that in mind. Then, how much of each one are you going to want in a compost pile? Well, ideally, you would want maybe like 2/3 green or brown. But honestly, you can really do whatever you really want to, as long as you're not trying to do hot composting, which I'll probably talk about in a later video or when my shorts talk about it. So you only really need half and half of each one. It doesn't really matter, but it can help. Just assume that you got about half and half. It doesn't matter. No need to count. No need to do any of the fancy stuff. Then how much ingredients do you really need in order to start out? Well, this can vary. Definitely very much. I got my one pile there, which I can show you right there. But it doesn't matter horribly on the size as long as it's about that size. Now, if you want to do hot composting, which is, it's just faster and other stuff, you would want a much bigger pile. Not horribly big, but maybe twice the size of that, which it can keep in all the heat and it really processes through and make a much better compost pile. But for cold composting and your normal composting, it doesn't matter. Just, you can't do a tiny little pile like this. But actually, you can. And there are many different ways of composting. I'm not going to go through all of them today. The main one is just in a pile. It's normal. But one thing that I figured out is you can take a bunch of these leaves because they're easy. They're just always easy. You can place them in a big pile, and then whenever you have food scraps or anything else, you can put the food scraps in the pile. You can just put it under there. And after a long time, you got fully finished compost. You got enough greens and you got enough browns. It's that simple. And if you don't have that many leaves, you can use other carbon sources. Or a better way is you can have it in a raised bed or even in a pot, because all the nitrogen can just release into the soil, and it's faster compost by far because it already has the microbes from the soil, and it's just perfect that way. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is you do not want a whole bunch of green material like this and very little browns, because I mean, granted, you want to make an even thing, but ultimately you need browns, because this is very important. Because if you only have a pile of this, let's say, it's going to decompose very slowly, and you really are only going to have carbon. It's not going to actually have a variety of nutrients and micronutrients. And if you were only to have that, that's pretty much the same thing, except for it's going to probably compost a little bit faster, but also it's not going to compost. It's going to get moldy. It's going to get smelly. You do not want to have it do that. And if it's a little bit smelly, who cares? As long as you have some carbon, it's not the end of the world. So hopefully you've already gotten the basic idea of composting and building a compost pile, but I'm not done yet. You need to maintain it when it's there. It's very important, because you can't just leave. I mean, actually you can, because that's what nature does, but I wouldn't suggest it. I would suggest at least every now and then putting water into it, which is totally fine if you're getting more rain. But when you're in a drought, you really need to get the water, because the compost is not going to do anything if it's bone dry. It's not going to decompost even a little bit. It can't do anything like that. So, which is why you need to add the water. But also, if you want a faster compost, and you need to do this really anyway, you need to take a pitchfork like this and stick it in the pile and turn it. Turning is very important in making a compost pile, because first of all, the thing is, most of the compost is actually going to be created in the center, but you're going to need to turn it, circulate it, and bring air into it so that it can at least kind of circulate a little bit. Some people will only do it once or twice, which is perfectly fine. It all depends on what you're doing. But if you want a little bit faster compost, and especially if you're doing hot compost, which, I mean, you can get compost in 30 days, you are going to want to take a pitchfork and do it maybe once a week for normal, but personally, I'd almost suggest doing it every other day, or even every day, or even twice a day. That pile is a relatively new pile. I have the time, so I can turn it like twice a day, and that's perfectly fine. Now, you don't really want to turn it really a whole lot, but twice a day is perfectly fine, and you'll probably get faster compost that way. It's a list of materials that have carbon, and there are brown materials right here. And then here's a list of green and that have nitrogen right here. One of the most important things is gathering the actual components in a compost pile, which you might have troubles. You're going to want to source it from other people if you want to get more compost, especially if you don't have a big garden. And they don't have to have a garden in order to get compost resources from that. You can get it from newspapers. You can even ask companies that shred their paper or send stuff, and you can use that for a compost pile, which I actually do that a little bit too. And you can get a ton of nitrogen with one simple thing. You can get coffee grounds from a random coffee place, which I have yet to do. I get a few from a library along with some newspapers every now and then. I've not received any of that in months, but you get the point. You can source all sorts of things from that. And if you have chickens, chicken manure is a great thing, which I have. And actually, I have chickens roaming around here, and I have my compost pile right there. And the chickens is a whole nother video, but the chickens can help turn it, and then I pile it back up together. It's a wonderful process, although I do have a compost pile back there that is fenced off, because chickens can tend to scatter everything farther than what you'd actually want. So unless the whole garden is a compost place, which some people do, which is amazing, but you need so much resources and stuff. So unless it's that, you might want to not do chickens, or you can have barriers so that they still can go into it, but all the stuff does not just fly out everywhere, which happened to one of my compost piles, and I'm not very happy about that, because all the compost resources just disappear, and you have no idea. They're just scattered along with everything else that's on the ground.